Hello, people, and welcome to Be the Vision podcast with Deno Babic. And we have a special guest today. He's a famous independent wrestler. He wrestled around Europe and Canada. And Mike, hello, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Speedball Mike Bailey. As you said, I've been an independent wrestler. I've been wrestling for about 15 years, and over the last few years, I've done most of my work in Japan, Europe, and Canada.
And
And
obviously, independent wrestling scene knows you, but for those that didn't know you, you wrestled in Japan as well, right?
yes, I did. I was right up until the everything stopped because of the global pandemic. I spent 4 years wrestling for DDT in Japan.
Okay, awesome, awesome. The first time I got to meet Mike was at a training seminar at Kamikaze Pro, and it was a small seminar, like 10 people, 15, maybe you don't even remember, but I was impressed how you can teach people that are at the beginning stages of their career and those that are at the later stages of their career at the same effect, if you know what I mean. Because sometimes you go to a wrestling seminar and a lot of the times the content of the seminar is based around the basics and you know
Yes.
how to explain it so everybody benefits. Can you talk a bit more about your teaching process and how you actually engage with students? When did you actually start teaching?
So I've been teaching basically like my whole life in a way. I before I started professional wrestling, I was already a black belt in Taekwondo. And so on a much lesser scale, I started giving Taekwondo classes when I was probably about 14, 15, to smaller children and just teaching them. So I always really approach teaching as an art form that is separate from being good at the sport you're doing. I know that it takes like it's a completely different skill being good at something and then being good at teaching it. And my taekwondo coach is a high school teacher, and he was not a great fighter in taekwondo. Like he didn't have any like world championship medals or anything like that, but he was a fantastic teacher and so a great coach. So I took that approach to wrestling, and ever since I started wrestling, I always kind of knew more than being good at this, I want to be good, of course, but I also want to understand why I'm good and what I'm doing works if it does, so that I can then transmit that to other people, because that's a very important thing. I also think teaching is the best way to truly understand something. If
Yes.
you want to know if you really have mastered something, be it anything, if it's music, wrestling, a sport, theories behind weightlifting and bodybuilding, try to
Hmm.
explain to someone else who doesn't know how and why your methods are good, and that'll really help you to understand it, just putting it into words. And so by teaching, I feel like that's made my pro wrestling even better, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of concepts that sort of are just like taken for granted or sort of just happen, but by explaining it to someone else who is not doing it, how to do it, is when you really get a deeper understanding of it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. A good teacher can transfer knowledge. It doesn't matter what subject it is because that's a talent somebody has.
Yes.
But speaking about wrestling, I came up with a lot of objections as I was doing service to ask what questions to ask you. So one of the biggest objections people have of not starting wrestling is their location. Um,
Yes.
if somebody doesn't know my story, but I'll be very quick. I started training wrestling since I was, I don't know, 15, 14. There's no wrestling here. There's no wrestling promotions. There is no ring. So we had to improvise. We had to do basketball. We had to do judo. We had to do MMA. We had to do everything we can to excel at being the athlete, at being the pro wrestler. Um, I feel like in the UK and stuff, people are taking those wrestling schools for granted, you know,
Absolutely agree.
and
Absolutely agree with that.
we're so hungry. We're so hungry here because we don't have it. Um, so my message to people that are saying that they have location issues or there's no wrestling in their country, so what? You know, it will make you even hungrier. It will make you even better. Um, Speaking about that, so what is your advice to people that do not have a wrestling promotions or wrestling school in their location? How can they excel at reaching their vision?
Man, I'm so glad you're talking about this because it's something I am so passionate about. And like in the course of traveling to all the places I've been to, it's something that I've come across a lot. And I've seen like there are many very, very good examples of it. So this is not just me plugging my own stuff, but it's perfectly relevant to what we're talking about. But I did a series of interviews on my YouTube that I filmed on Twitch and then put them on YouTube. But I interviewed people like Icarus, who is from Hungary, who basically started out as like started his own scene in
Yes.
Hungary where there was no professional wrestling, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Spoke to Carlos Romo in Spain, where there is some wrestling but very little, and so he took a hand in teaching and really having one school and only being able to wrestle like once a month, if that, which is very little. And then taking it upon himself to get better. I spoke with Manny, who has been a promoter here in Quebec for 20 years, who really when he started his promotion called the IWS, where I teach at the school now, there was really no wrestling, no independent wrestling at all in Quebec, or barely any. So really, he started by just doing shows with his friend at a bar, and then
Hmm.
eventually they bought a ring, and then eventually they had some people that
Yeah.
were fully trained come and help them learn. But myself as well, if you ask me where I started wrestling, I'm gonna say, well, when me and my brother were seven, like when I was 7 years old, my brother was nine, we started wrestling. We saw what
Yes.
we saw, we watched it on TV, and then we just tried to replicate it in our backyard. And people will say like that gets looked down upon in wrestling for some stupid reason, because if you pay attention, you'll know that some of the best wrestlers in the world right now
Yes.
started in their backyard. And when I started wrestling, I felt it. That experience was like valuable. I didn't know the proper basics and I didn't know like the etiquette and all the conventions of pro wrestling, but my body was used to being picked up and thrown around and like taking someone else and just landing, even though it was not the best landings for the best things, I still had repetitions and my body was still used to it. There and I think like that's perfectly valid. Any experience is perfectly valid. Wrestling is not this sacred thing. At one point it started, and the way wrestling started was two guys who could do martial arts decided, hey, let's put on a fake fight. And that happens, and it like there's no reason why it should be sacred or special. The rules are all relatively made up. You can, if you want to, just start wrestling and it will still be valid. It will still be wrestling. As long as your heart is in the right place, you'll get there. The Especially right now, on top of that, there is plenty of information online. It's a different thing when we're talking about 20 years ago, when you had wrestling on TV. If you were lucky enough to have it play on TV in your country, which a lot didn't. If not, you could find VHS tapes of wrestling by ordering them on the internet. But now, wrestling is everywhere. You can go on your cell phone and watch matches from all around the world, every era, every period, every style, every background, until you find one that resonates with you. And then
Yeah.
just safely, of course, try to replicate that on your own. There's also loads of seminars that happen online. Just by going on YouTube, you can literally find more than enough information
Hmm.
to get like a solid base in becoming a pro wrestler. And then part of it is just getting the repetitions in, and that's the most important part. I have a lot of feelings about wrestling school and how wrestling is taught. I think very often it's not very good. And I just want to like, you've done some martial arts, correct?
Yes. Yes. That
Right.
is my
Okay.
base actually.
Good. Perfect. Then you'll understand this analogy very well, right? I like this is how I look at teaching. The three levels of it, with the center one being a completely neutral wrestling. And now let's apply it to martial arts. And then I want you to tell me within the three scenarios who will be better in a, let's say, a mixed martial arts fight, right?
Hmm.
One person trains at a great gym with great trainers who have like mixed martial arts experience and have like traveled the world. Then there are two guys who you just told them, hey, go, learn to fight, do your best.
Hmm.
And then there is this other group of people that I will tell, um, sign up at this extremely traditional kung fu school where the master is 50 years old and overweight. And then
That's
who's going to perform the best? I don't
obviously
think
the
it's this
first
one.
one.
Right, obviously the first one, but then between the two other, right, that middle one is still gonna outperform the last one, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of wrestling. A lot of people try to learn wrestling, but all they do is get boxed in, and it's in fact counterproductive. It would be better if they had just went, hey, let's figure it out on
Wow,
our own.
that's kind of like contra of every social, what the famous gurus on the YouTube are saying right now, that the best thing to do to learn something is to actually do it, and what you're saying is totally contradictory, and I agree, because there's one thing is theory and one thing is experience, but everybody is going to have a different perspective of that experience. So that doesn't mean that you learn from that experience. That actually just means that you experience the experience. So if you have the theory behind the experience, you're going to understand what is happening a bit more, and that relates to any subject matter, not only wrestling. So
Right.
yeah.
So wrestling, I think, is the most like that. And more to my theory behind teaching, I look at it as a pyramid of importance, right? Where I will teach what is most important the most, and I will teach what is less important the least. And then when it comes to goals, everyone has goals in pro wrestling, and my goal as a teacher is to help you reach those goals, having whatever your version of success is. uh, just to go a little bit deeper into that, many people's goals is, let's say, make it to NXT, right? Make it to WWE or AEW or a major promotion. Now, if I want to understand how I want to teach wrestling, I have to look at who reaches that goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which again, this is like an extreme goal, but going to Japan or just being successful on the independents also applies. Then I look at two things. Who makes those goals, who reaches, who comes to NXT, and I see two kinds of people. I see giant super athletes, right? Guys that are 6'8" or NFL players, and that's fully out of my control.
Mm.
So I can dismiss that one. But then the second group that I saw, and the through line between everyone that makes it, is they have compelling and exciting matches consistently. That is
Right.
the most important thing. The quality of your match.
Mm-hmm.
Much more important to me, being able to teach people within the pyramid how to have exciting matches versus making sure that their wrist locks are clean.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, awesome. And how do you teach somebody to have a exciting match?
Well, so I think the most important part is, like, to put it in short, is focus on your strengths. Know that you don't have to be good at everything. You just have to find what you're good at and get good at highlighting that.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that is to focus on this part, like the one aspect of wrestling that to me is the most important, right? I look at it as in three aspects sort of for pro wrestling. One is like three aspects that influence the quality of your match, which again,
Mm-hmm.
that being the most important thing, the quality of your match. How you perform in the ring, right? During the actual match, how you do and how you perform, the choices that you decide to make. And then there's before, like the way before, there's your physical conditioning and your training and your preparation. But the most important part to me that I've witnessed have the most impact on the, like, directly on the quality of a match is how you handle the hour or two before your wrestling match. What you do between the time that you show up to the venue with
Yes.
your opponent up until you get into the ring, how you handle that
Mm-hmm.
has the greatest effect on the quality of your match. And if you want to look at like examples that support my theory, just look at all the people that have come to, for example, WWE. We saw Bad Bunny, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of preparation, but most of it was just planning the match, making sure he makes the right choices and he retains those, and then executes them. The way he executes them is like pales in comparison to what he decides to execute, right?
Yeah.
And like in that are how you structure your match, how you spend your time, what you choose to plan, like what you choose to do in the ring really goes into that. And I think that is where you really get the chance to look good. You get the chance to focus on your strengths. I've seen matches fall apart. When matches are bad, it's always because of something that they did in the planning, in that hour, in the decisions. Is rarely because someone didn't perform or because someone is poorly trained. It is almost always because they made bad choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And I would say the last principle is actually applicable to any sport whatsoever because we can train and, be ready and prepared. But, last half an hour or hour before a match or a fight, the mental state and everything,
Yes.
the how actually you approach it. And now we're coming back to, people that are unable, to train the ring and stuff. Let's say you have a competitive judo matches, you kind of condition yourself to be in that situation, and although this is not a professional wrestling match, you're putting yourself in new experiences, and you're actually going to handle that pressure better when you get to the professional wrestling ring. That's why so many successful athletes are successful in wrestling, because, and even maybe Bad Bunny, because same thing, showbiz, you have to put yourself in exciting situations, so it's kind of the same, wouldn't you say?
The main thing, like the biggest predetermined factor to whether or not someone will be successful when they begin pro wrestling, to me, is are they good at something else already? Of course,
Mm,
it's better if it's something that directly applies, like martial arts, but even if it's something like, let's say, painting or improvisational comedy, just the fact that you have learned how to learn
mm-hmm.
puts you at a huge advantage. Just the fact that you've done the process before of being bad at something and understanding that you will be bad at a thing for a while, but then eventually you get good, makes a major difference. The problem is when people start pro wrestling and they haven't, something that is incredibly difficult, but they haven't previously learned how to learn,
Yeah.
right? Pro wrestling, something that's very evident is that you will be bad at it early on. It takes a lot of time to get good and to like present something that you're proud of,
Yeah.
and understanding that it'll take a lot of work, and knowing that and coming in with that skill set already is immensely important, as well as like learning how to learning how to receive and then apply information from something else is hugely important.
Yeah.
So like it, the best thing you can do, if you're like, for example, people who are too young to attend their local pro wrestling school, whatever, the best advice is pick a skill and master it. If you come into wrestling already having mastered one thing, then mastering pro wrestling will be a lot less difficult.
Yeah, and you have that unique characteristic about yourself.
Exactly.
How do you help people that want to work on their character in pro wrestling?
Um, I think that comes with the match, and I think we put too much emphasis on heels and faces and gimmicks and characters in professional wrestling, especially as independent wrestlers, where of course, like whatever promotion you're working for does not pay your salary. They're simply there to help you learn, and that's how you should look at it. Until pro wrestling is your job and somebody has hired you to do it, and that like promotion or person or organization or whatever will feed your family, your main goal is progress to get better. And the best way to get better is to focus on, once again, match quality. And so
Hmm.
whatever gimmick you choose to do, if you're a heel or a face, what decides that should be the match quality, right? And your progress. And my issue with characters and gimmicks very often is that people will just pick something that isn't necessarily them, and then that will actually get in the way of them becoming good wrestlers.
Oh, okay. Too much emphasis on the character, you
Too
would
much
say.
emphasis on the character. Be yourself, learn to be yourself in a ring, and then once you're already good at being yourself in a ring, then figure out a way to enhance that. Figure out a character that will add to that to make it more fun. But I see it often as a crutch where people
Hmm.
will find a character to cover up their weaknesses in the ring,
Yeah.
when
I
I think it
think
should be the other way
I
around.
think
But
of
yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I think of the quote of David Richards, which he said, "Wrestling shouldn't be fun. It should be so good that it's fun."
Yes, I agree with that. You should make it fun once you're yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought that's a wonderful quote, and I know you worked with one of the best wrestlers in the world, but you also work with wide variety of talents. So you can work a camp show, whatever. You know how many shows are in the UK. So
Yes.
I would say my next question would be, what's the main difference of wrestling somebody like Puck and wrestling somebody up and coming, not that experienced? What's the main difference?
How well they know themselves. That is the main difference. How good you are at highlighting your strengths over the years. You're in your journey as a pro wrestler. You should learn what you are the best at. And someone like Pac has figured out how to be Pac very well. He knows what he does. He knows what makes him unique and what sets him apart. So I don't have to work as hard with Pac to figure out what that is. Where someone who doesn't know as well will sort of have a more generic move set and character and sort of just does kind of pro wrestling that they randomly chose. And my work is to figure out how can I highlight that? How can I highlight the parts of themselves that seem the best? And then for like someone like me who's very experienced working with someone that's less experienced, it's really oftentimes one thing I find myself doing is looking through my opponent's old matches and figure out like watch and pay attention to what they do that's great. Because one mistake that people make very often planning matches is not putting in their best things and sort of leaving them to the side too much when it's things that like
Awesome. Can you repeat again those three things just so it comes in a habit, the three things of making the match good with
I'm
with
sorry.
with with the last one being the 1 hour before a match, three parameters that are.
Yes.
Can you repeat them one more time?
Yeah. So in terms of percentage of how much they impact the quality of your match, 25% is how you perform in the ring, like bell to bell, how you choose to apply the choices you made. Then 25% preparation, physical conditioning, training, and all that. And then 50% the choices you decide to make in the ring, how
Yes.
you spend the hour before the match, and what you tell your opponent and what you tell each other, and how you choose the ideas you choose to use for the match.
Awesome, awesome. And the main thing we got from this wonderful. I want to thank you one more time, Mike, for speaking with us. He's sharing so much knowledge. And when I was 14, 15, I would kill for information like that. There was no, even wrestling was not that popular in, I don't know, 2012, 13. It was popular, but there was not this much information about wrestling.
So
You
that's exactly what I'm trying to do. You brought up seminars early on, and I see a lot of people give seminars, and every time I give one, my thought is, how can I make today's show even better? What can I tell the people that will directly help the show? Everything I'm trying to say right now to as many people as possible through seminars, through podcasts, through uh, means like this one is basically everything that I wish that someone would have told me when I was starting wrestling. One of the hard things for me when I started wrestling is there was a lot of very good wrestlers in Quebec in 2006, but there were very, very few people who knew how to have good matches,
mm,
which is a different thing. And again, it's about that hour before where there's a lot of people that I want to go up to them right now and say, hey man, you were athletic, you knew your basics, you were good. Why weren't your matches good? Which happened all the time. And that's pretty much what I was. I was like, I had years of martial arts. I was able to do crazy athletic maneuvers and I was motivated and in shape, but I had no one to explain to me, this is what you need to do to consistently have good matches that stand out. But rather, I was just kind of trying and doing my cool stuff and hoping that it worked in a very disorganized and uncalculated way because I had no one to help me organize and calculate it.
Therefore, from the conversation we are having right now, just to say it again, so you so it goes into your habit. What Mike is saying actually is that preparation is everything. I'll give you an example. So I came to the wrestling school in the UK when I was 20. It took me a month and a half to make my debut. The reason for that was because I was already ready before I came to wrestling school. Okay, I needed to learn how to put on a wrestling match, which we're gonna talk about in the future. I needed to learn all the basics of wrestling, but athletically I was already there. So it's a real shame when I see guys pay so much money or go somewhere, move away. The worst thing is to move away because it takes so much time to move away, as you know as well. And
Mm-hmm.
then they come to wrestling school and then they learn like the basics of fitness. I mean, uh, if if you want to, make the best out of the time in wrestling school, you want to have your fitness figured out already. You want to have your athletics figured out already. Wouldn't you agree?
I completely agree. This is something that someone I like a lot, which is I'm sure you're familiar with George St. Pierre from
Yeah.
former UFC welterweight champion. His coach, this is something that he said, and I think it applied greatly to professional wrestling. Learning mixed martial arts versus learning a martial art. When you're learning a martial art, like you have one thing to focus on, you can like make that happen. But if you want to teach someone mixed martial arts, you have like 5 different aspects to teach them, right? Uh,
Yes.
Ground fighting, takedowns and takedown defense, striking, physical fitness, and like the mental aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you come to MMA, well, someone needs to have at least a good part of all of those for you to be able to put that all together and make the
Mm-hmm.
person a decent MMA fighter. I think wrestling is the same way. There are many, many different aspects to professional wrestling. Again, you need to be a good gymnast, you need to be a good actor, you need to be a good striker, you need to be a good grappler, and you need to be a good writer. All of
Mm-hmm.
those things together. And if you don't know any of those things and I have to teach them all in order for you to become a decent professional wrestler, the task is very difficult. You're
Yes.
way better off coming in with already a skill set, some strengths that I can focus on, and then we'll put it all together. And then it's going to be a lot more reasonable than expecting to learn all of it at the same time. Come in with skills, and then we'll figure out how to make it work in pro wrestling rather than trying to learn all the skills at once, which has a very, very low percentage rate statistically. You look at who comes into wrestling schools and who becomes a good wrestler. Well, the biggest determining factor is, are they already coming in with a skill set?
Yes. Yes. Um, Talking about the match structure itself, I think you are the one of the people that completely, opened up, because you had a lot of the seminars at Kamikaze Pro, and one of them
Yes.
was constructing a match. And then I
Yes.
think you just came from a Japan tour,
Mm-hmm.
and you were talking about, formulating a match, and then you talked how, comeback is called fire in Japan, and so on.
Yes.
Uh, so I want to talk about that. Like, let's say I'm new to this.
Yes.
Uh, I'm very athletic, I'm skilled, I know how to do it, but I don't know how to formulate a wrestling match. Can you explain to me what is shine, what is comeback, what is heat, how to, structure that, maybe with the example of, I don't know, let's say what are your 3 moves, my 3 moves, and done. Let's try to put on a match, me and you together right now.
Okay, well, hold on. So first off, let me explain what I mean by that. Like, so how I define structure in a pro wrestling match is how you choose to use your time, right? It's even more than just the parts you'll play, but how you use your time, because the number one factor that will determine your structure is the amount of time you have, right? Typically, when you come up to a pro wrestling show, you're given minimal information by the promoter, usually, right? Which is
Yeah,
normally you win or I win, and how long the match has to be.
yeah,
Where 90% of the time, uh, the instruction is one winner, and then let's say 10 to 12 minutes, right? That's the main thing. So
yeah,
structure is figuring out how you'll use that 10 to 12 minutes. And then the basics of structure goes basically into I know it varies greatly by country, but as part of a curriculum, usually in like 6th grade or whatever, you learn the basics of writing a story, right? Where you have an introduction, and then I don't know I only know the names in French because that's how I was taught. But there's a beginning, and then something happens, and then there's péripétie, they call it. I don't know, whatever the middle bit, and then something brings it to an end, and then there's a conclusion, right? Does
mm-hmm.
that sound about familiar?
Yeah,
Right. So there's a version of that, but that applies to pro wrestling. And then the names you use for it and how you decide is personal and purely referential. There
mm-hmm.
is no objective structure. There is no one way to do it, right or wrong. What's best is what's best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I can offer is a great starting point by letting you know what works for me and what works with a lot of people and what I see most commonly used. But your quest as a pro wrestler is to figure out what works best for you. And for example, matches typically start with chain wrestling, right? Our beginning will be chain wrestling. But if I'm
Yeah,
not good at chain wrestling, I'm a striker and my opponent is a good grappler. then I should not do chain wrestling, because that's not the story we're trying to tell. Right?
Yes.
You can avoid chain wrestling. If your matches are, personally for me, I have better result working with a lot of false finishes. So that means
Okay.
I will push the comeback earlier so that I can work and slowly set up my big stunts later, because that works better for me. But it's perfectly fine to push the comeback a little bit later in the match to keep the beginning longer and be able to just freestyle wrestle earlier if that's what works for you.
Yes.
Right? And then it's a matter of figuring out with your opponent how we can both highlight our strengths the best. But so typical parts of how I will divide my 10-minute pro wrestling match, right? Uh Finish, right? Which is the most important part. So I will start with that. I will start with the end again, because for two reasons. One is that it will help you a lot in building the match if you know where it's going. You know the end of the story, so how do you get to the end? Which prevents like a lot of mistakes that I can talk about later. And then the second part is wrestling is time sensitive. You never know. It's a very like common situation that something will happen and then your planning time will get cut short, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we only have a finish and we get told by the promoter, hey, you guys need to go now, we'll be okay. We'll figure out. And if our finish is good, then in the audience's mind, we'll have a good match, because again, the last thing they see is the most important, so the finish needs the most attention. And then if the match is so and then the finish is great, we're still fine. But if our match has a great beginning and then the finish is bad, well, then the audience will remember it's a bad match because they've forgotten about the beginning. They only remember the end. And if it ended with a lackluster finish, then that's
Mm-hmm.
what they'll remember. And what's the point? So, and again, time distribution, right? So let's say 2 minutes for the finish, right? Then uh I'll say 2 minutes for one false finish with our 10-minute match, because false finishes are what make matches exciting. Movies are not enjoyable to watch if you know when it's going to end.
Yeah.
What makes it enjoyable is that you don't know when it's going to end. You don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen. Is the hero dying now? Oh my god, no, he's still alive. And then the movie ends. Also false finish, like this is a little bit more inside, but if like in independent wrestling, I see it very much used to only mean a near fall, which for me is a very different thing, where you go 1, 2, and then a kick out. No, to me, a false finish is a lot more than a near fall. A false finish implies that I tried to make the audience believe, using psychology, that the match was going to end with this move. And then the two main ways to do that are simply just showing that this move is a move I used to win
So what
matches.
you're talking about is a sequence, not a move. So false finish is a sequence of moves or counters or whatever, which ends in a fall. But a
Yes,
lot of the
and
people, yeah.
yes. Sorry. Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's more of a sequence. And again, it should be in your structure. You're going to use, let's say, 2 minutes for your false finish. That means you use those 2 minutes to focus on the one move that will end it. So you use the whole time to build up that one move. So, like, an easy way to build a false finish is just to announce to the audience, I will hit this move because I win matches with it, by simply going for it, and then have it countered, and then make an exciting sequence that builds up the tempo. And then when you finally hit the move that you said you were going to win matches with, and
Yeah.
the other one kicks out, they have a reason to believe it was going to end, right? Or the second is the tying up of a story, right? Matches have contained many small stories. For example, if my opponent has a manager that's
Mm-hmm.
been teasing me and trying to grab my leg the whole match. And then when I finally do, the manager tries to get involved, but I counter it. So my guy bumps heads with the manager, and then I give him the move. Then, because we concluded the manager's story, the audience has a reason to believe that the move will end the match.
Yes.
Right? It's more than just a near fall. It's more than just I did a cool move.
Yeah.
And that's what to me makes a false finish, because if your finish sequence is 2 minutes, then it should include near falls. It should be exciting. It should include moments where I go for the move, but no, he puts me in a small package. One,
Mm-hmm.
two, near fall. I get up, but then I sprint through and try to bring the tempo and the excitement up to as high as it can be, so that we can ensure that we end on the highest note. That is why a finish is 2 minutes and not 30 seconds before it because it's one move. False finish works in the exact same way. You want to bring up the tempo so that when you do hit that near fall, you make the audience believe that it's going to end the match.
So the false finish is one of the most important aspect of formulating a wrestling match. You should put the most focus on the end of the story because that's the culmination. Uh, so false finish has the same type of importance as the finish, or would you say so?
So I would say less.
Hmm.
Right. I would say less because you can remove it. You can not have a false finish to a match. Um, you can't not have a finish.
How do you explain a lot of the independent, wrestling style, doing over the top, false finishes and in a sense killing the psychology of the matches itself,
So I think the focus needs to be on progression, right? And again, this is a mistake I hear a lot. Like the structure of your match is going to be shine, cut off, heat, comeback, falsies, finish. How long is your match? 30 minutes. When is the comeback? Minute 8.
ah,
And then you have 22 minutes of your match that
yes.
you just called falsies and finished. That doesn't make any sense. So you need to structure that as well. The part that you will typically hear as called falsies for long matches should be a lot more detailed than that. And for example, in my matches, my 20-minute match will feature something that sounds a lot more like this, right? Comeback happens at minute 8, and then it's heel falsy, then it's face falsy, then it's double down, then it's bigger heel falsy, then it's bigger face falsy, then it's an event, then it's one giant stack, then another down, and then a long finishing sequence.
Hmm.
I haven't simply called it falsy because it's 12 minutes, so I need to structure that as well, because if not, I won't be able to, one, keep track of it and make sure that there is progression, and two, I will get lost in the planning.
So
Uh,
what is happening then with those matches is people having, I don't know, 15, 10 minutes and then just throwing as much as they can in the false
yes,
finishers to showcase what they got, so to say.
and then it ends up flat. And what I mean by flat is that when you plan a wrestling match, everything needs to have a score, a number, right? If I'm going to do a Canadian Destroyer off the top rope, that's going to be a 10. If I'm going to do a moonsault off a balcony, that's going to be a 10. If I'm going to do a DDT as a falsie, that's going to be a 3, right? So I need to put those in order. And if I just say falsies, then I have no way to keep track of the numbers. But if I have heel falsie, face falsie, double down, big falsie, finish, then I know my small falsie is, for example, let's say the buzzsaw kick because it's just a
Hmm.
hit. Like it looks like a finish if I tease it well, but really it's just one kick. And then my bigger falsie is going to be I don't know, a sequence that ends in a big flipping pile driver or
Hmm.
something that's bigger, right? And so I need to put those in the right order in order to keep track of that,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then you add like double down. Every part of your match needs to be bigger than the last,
Hmm.
than the
And this is
previous.
what we are calling a psychology in a match.
So I think there are three different things in that: logic, structure, and psychology. And that is psychology. Psychology is really anything that has to do with how the audience will react or what they will think.
So what you're saying is every match is logic, structure, and psychology.
Yes, the planning of it should like you could mostly talk about these three parts. For example, teasing a move to make sure that it means the most, that's psychology,
Hmm.
right? Me working your leg the whole match and then you ducking three of my clothesline while running the ropes, that is logic.
Hmm.
Logic should dictate that your leg should hurt, so you should not be able to run,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then again, structure is how you divide your time, and these three things put together are really what makes up like the planning of the match. Um,
Yeah.
but I see them as three like different things, whereas psychology just gets like melded into one. Like all these things just get called psychology, and psychology gets used as an umbrella term to mean too many things. But
Oh,
really,
okay.
like in my head, when you say psychology, it's really manipulating the audience and trying to make them feel something or believe something or not believe something or trying to trick them in a way. That is psychology. Logic, a different thing. I don't think it's called psychology when you mean like the manager is there the whole time, but then the finish doesn't involve the manager at all.
Mm.
That's illogical because the manager would do whatever it takes to get his protege to win the match, but then he doesn't, which is boring and like illogical. So then removes the suspension of disbelief and then becomes boring.
Mm-hmm. And coming back to the strong points of a match, as you said, like main difference between Pac and wrestling somebody unexperienced is that those guys know their strengths.
Yes.
The only way for individuals to find out their strengths is actually having a wrestling matches, right?
So I think it's twofold. Of course, like number one way that decides the order in which you will place your moves in the match and what is best and what is bad is the reaction of the audience. That's direct, that's easy to understand. I do this one move and it gets a great reaction, great. And then also, that's how you should figure out your move set, right? If, for example, if I want to employ a new move and I do it in the heat, in the like slow part of a match, but it gets a bigger reaction than my false finish, then I switch them. I move it up. And if I use the same moves as a false finish and it gets a bigger reaction than when I hit my finisher, then I move it up. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how you figure out your move set in the long run. And of course, if you've been wrestling for 20 years, every little thing you do, you've paid attention to. So you know exactly how to place them in order to make sure that there's progression and the reactions get bigger and bigger, which is what Pac does. He knows exactly all his moves and where to place them and where they fit in the match because of 20 years of experience. But also, you can have a pretty good idea. Um, and that's something that's been happening a lot with like studio wrestling or wrestling without an audience. There's no direct reaction of what move will get a big pop or no. You sort of just have to guess. But I mean, you have an innate sense for that just from watching enough wrestling. You know that, for example, a big dive of the top rope to the outside usually gets a good reaction. So that should be late in the match, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus a body slam typically gets a mild reaction. So maybe that shouldn't be your falsie.
Yeah. And speaking about these times we are right now, there's like a big gap, of people because crowd is a big part of our sport.
Yeah.
It's almost like the
Wrestling is
third.
made for live audiences.
Yes. So
Yep.
there's like a big gap right now of, let's say, people are starting to become pro wrestlers or stuff, and they don't have like in crowd experience, so to
Yes.
say. How do you think we'll fill in, that void? Because so as sometimes in a match you connect with the crowd. You just go out, entrance, poof, you connect it. Sometimes it takes a bit more to connect. Sometimes
Yes.
you need, sometimes you connect in the beginning, but you lose them, in your cutoff or whatever. So it's a constant process. So I was wondering, like, how do you actually practice, connecting with the crowd, and how can those people, I know this is a hard question, but how can those people that are unable, to perform in front of the crowds right now, so let's say me and my mentor right now, we are now training, how can we, simulate the experience of a crowd more?
So that's a great question. Um, I have two answers for that. When we were so I've been teaching at a school here in Montreal, and it's been on and off where we did get to do some wrestling for a little bit during the summer, but no crowds. And then even if you have just one person there is helpful. One person that is just reacting like they think a crowd would besides the ring, and you're doing a practice match and for like they're just reacting like they think a crowd would, that's already helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you shouldn't focus about on it so much.
Mm-hmm.
I am really, really hoping that even after the pandemic, studio wrestling remains a thing. Like it remains acceptable to film a wrestling show with no crowd and put it out on the internet. Because again, for a situation like yours, where I'm sure it's a lot harder to produce a full wrestling show than it is to just have training matches, it makes wrestling a lot more accessible. If you can put out
Mm-hmm.
a weekly studio taping and use that to get experience, I think that's perfectly valid and that's only going to be helpful. But then it's about being objective. It's about being able to tell yourself if what you're doing is bad and good, and the camera doesn't lie. Film yourself while you wrestle, have matches and tape them, and then watch them and analyze them carefully, and you can tell if they look bad on your phone, then they're going to look bad on TV cameras as well.
Mm-hmm.
Something looks great on your phone, it's going to look good on TV cameras as well. It's just
Mm-hmm.
about being objective and being able to say, this was bad, this was good, I need to fix this, this did not look good upon rewatching yourself.
Yeah, and one of the things we're doing here in Croatia when we're, training wrestling is we're actually doing entrances as well. And
Yes.
the reason for that is because, well, I've never practiced entrances at any wrestling school I went to, but it's also to get inside the character right away because oftentimes when we're, practicing wrestling, we're just starting to do, a match, but we're not that much hype, the
Yes.
hype you feel in a match and stuff. So when we started doing entrances, it kind of felt more real, but it
Yeah.
also, eliminated that, how can I put this delicately, that shyness of the entrance,
Yes.
because you have to make an entrance in front of, I don't know, two people or nobody.
Hmm.
So my next question is how to actually to formulate a wrestling entrance, how to create it, because there's like a process for that, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, of course. It's just like everything in wrestling. I think you need to look at your entrance as part of your match. I think that is the number one thing. Uh, if every part of the structure for your match has a very specific goal, right? For example, the heat, which is the slower down part, usually around the end of the first quarter of the match, is to give the audience a break, is to give the wrestlers a little bit of a break, give them time to digest what just happened, and let them build anticipation for when the action picks back up again. Right,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part of it. The beginning of the match, the goal of the part of a match that is called the beginning, is to establish dynamics, establish characters, let the audience know if he's a good guy, if he's a bad guy, or what's about to happen, to give them a sense, let them situated and know the characters, right? So the entrance fits into the beginning of a match. So know
Mm-hmm.
what the goal of your match is, right? What are you trying to establish during your entrance, and how is it going to help your match? If the
Yes.
story that we're trying to tell in our match is that we're both great athletes, but I'm willing to cheat and you're not, then I'm going to use my entrance to show that I'm also a great athlete. So do some athletic stuff in your entrance. And then when the ring bell and we shake hands and do some athletic stuff, but then I pull your hair, it gets a
Mm-hmm.
bigger reaction because I've built up to that. It's something I do as well. If I'm going to be the bad guy, which I'm never really the bad guy, like my character is not never that I am like a overt cheater or a scumbag or whatever. Um, I slow down the action, and so I'm going to tell that in my entrance as well. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be the one who slows down the match, then I'm going to take my time and be very deliberate about my entrance and make people wait and let my opponent be fast and exciting and athletic. And then when we continue to illustrate that in the match, it just has even more emphasis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus if my opponent is going to be big and slow things down and cut me off and prevent the audience from seeing all the exciting stuff I can do, then my entrance is going to be a lot faster and exciting, and I'm going to show
Mm-hmm.
a lot more things that I can do and get the audience really behind me so that it matters in the match. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really my thoughts about entrances, is that they're part of the match and there to enhance that. So figure out what you're trying to do in the match and then figure out how can my entrance complement that.
Awesome. And that's the experience I actually got when I was wrestling in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
in Austria, I'm sorry. Hopefully one day in Australia as well. But yeah, so the story of a match of me in Austria was that, I'm that, cocky, flashy guy from Croatia who's very athletic. And then the entrance was like, if you want to check it, it's on YouTube, whoever is watching this. So the entrance was very flashy and cocky. The Austrian people connected with it, and the beginning of a match was just like you said. I actually slapped the guy and something like that. But we actually connected from the entrance, so it was really not that hard to continue the match
Yes.
altogether because people already connected. So we could have taken our time, and look at the people here and look at here, and when you got them. So that's such a wonderful feeling, you know.
Yes.
Uh,
Whereas the opposite that often fails is you do your entrance and you're literally flipping the crowd the bird and you're telling them how much you hate them and how ugly they are, and then you lock up and calmly wrestle with your opponent for
yeah.
2 minutes before starting the action, which doesn't make sense. You're angry enough to tell perfect strangers that you hate them, yet with your opponent you're going to be a very polite, calm, and collected wrestler. then it's confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to confuse people. I
That
mean,
is the
wrestling is confusing already, to
already,
somebody.
yeah.
So another thing that I also noticed when I'm practicing matches or when I'm having matches is that I actually get sometimes better input from people that have seen wrestling for the second or third time and are not
Yes.
wrestling fans than from actually wrestling fans. How do you cater to the mainstream audience, so to say?
So that is, I'm glad you're hitting on that because it's a super important piece of advice. But every time you wrestle, you are wrestling for the people that do not have an opinion before the people that already have an opinion. Always wrestle for the people that don't know you, because the people already know you. They're a lot more likely to enjoy or not enjoy what you do based on what they've seen before. But if it's the first time, right? It's also like this is a thing that's said about restaurants a lot, but someone who goes to the restaurant for the first time has a 30% chance of coming back. And then someone
Mm-hmm.
who comes back to the restaurant for a second time then has a 70% chance of coming back. And if anyone goes to the restaurant 3 times, then there's 90% that they're going to come back every single time and just become regulars. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
people that are the most important. And there's a lot of things that people take for granted. For example, finishers is the number one example of that, where people, like, as independent wrestlers, the average is you'll wrestle once a month for a certain promotion with, like, let's say 8, 9, or 10 matches on the card. It
Mm-hmm.
is impossible for the people in the crowd to remember your move set and your moves. That is just
Mm-hmm.
not going to happen. They will not remember your finisher. And then if in your match you introduce your finisher with the assumption that, oh, because I won my match with this last month, they will care, is wrong. You have to
Yeah.
introduce everything and explain to the audience in, not with words, but with your actions. This is my finisher. This is a move I want to hit. It has importance. And when I hit it, I will try to win by, for example, teasing it many times or things like that, going in and out of it, have some way. Same thing for your character. Never
Mm-hmm.
assume that, oh, they don't like me here, so they'll cheer for the other guy. No, I'll assume that the people that assume the audience is seeing you for the first time and give them a reason not to like you. If you're the babyface, give them a reason to cheer for you.
Mm-hmm.
Build your match this way. Always assume that, like, never assume that anyone knows a single thing about you, and you will always be more successful.
How important are first steps in wrestling, in business, in anything whatsoever? So I'll give you an example. I had a great first mentor as my wrestling coach, and hello to Chris. He was a great mentor, and I think that maybe that was one of the most important factors why I had so much quick success in the UK is because I started to train with the correct people at the correct time. Uh, what would you say, like, are the first steps the most important, because this is where we actually formulate our habits in wrestling, and a lot of the times it's a lot harder to erase those habits than to implement them in the first step.
I yes and no. I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I've seen a lot of people also be bad for a very, very long time. I guess more than first steps, it's intelligence and, like, knowing how to tell apart good and bad information. Because very
Mm-hmm.
often, like, people will get good information first and be able to recognize it, and that's great. But oftentimes people will get a lot of bad information for a very long time and then eventually recognize the good information and then click and then go.
Yeah.
And then there's people also that will hear a lot of bad information and a lot of good information, or maybe good information right away or later on. It doesn't matter. If you can't tell them apart, then there's not much helping you.
So what you need to do is to separate the
Yes.
and to make your own conclusion what argument is valid and what argument is not valid.
Um, Two components. Again, you can look at who is telling you and why they're telling you. That's an important part. Of course, you'll trust someone who you like their matches and you enjoy their work and you would like to do what they're doing. Their arguments should hold a lot more weight for you than someone who you don't click with or don't think is very good. But also, don't be afraid to challenge people. Never ever. I know it's a thing in wrestling and I hate it so much. It makes me so mad. It's like, hey, if someone that is higher than you in the hierarchy or more experience is talking to you, don't say anything. Don't say back. Just say yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. I think that's terrible and I think that's bad. And I want the opposite. Whenever I'm teaching a seminar, I always want people to tell me if they have an opposing argument or an opposing viewpoint or want to debate anything. Because if I can't argue my idea, it shouldn't be valid.
Mm-hmm.
Never take anything for granted that I'm saying just because I'm saying it. If you can't understand it, and then also if I can't explain it to you in a way that you understand it, then why am I even saying it?
So to counter you right away, didn't you say you had a good mentor, a karate, good mentor at first
Yes,
few years?
yes.
So basically you were in a similar situation like myself. You had a good mentor at the start, and that's what actually made you good later because you formulated all the good habits at the beginning.
Yes.
But what you're saying is that it's good to hear, solutions from everybody, but then come to your own conclusion which one to use and
So
from what perspective somebody's
I
telling you.
had a great mentor when it comes to Taekwondo and a great coach, but I didn't for professional wrestling.
Mm.
I didn't at all. And I received very little information that mattered. Like what I got told a lot when I started wrestling was things like, "Hey, slow down, kid," or "Do
Mm-hmm.
less flips," or "Do less," which is completely meaningless because when you tell someone slow down, what I want to know is am I running the ropes too fast,
Mm-hmm.
or am I not taking enough time between spots? There's no explanation, and then that's bad advice until I've had people explain it to me. I got to work with people that knew what they were talking about, like Kevin Steen, Kevin
Mm-hmm.
Owens. Now, when I first got to work with him, and I heard all the things like he told me when building the match, I was like, "Oh, damn, that makes a lot of sense," and I need to be able to understand how to do that. But I didn't for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I was a bad wrestler for the first 4 years. I was athletic and impressive, and I got by because of that. But I had no success, or I was not renowned as a pro wrestler because I didn't hear the right information, so I wasn't able to
So
progress in the
what
way that I
advice
would
did
have.
Kevin give you?
It was less advice directly, but more the way he worked and how detail oriented he was. Everything he did, like again, speaking of focusing on his strength, he understood why he did everything he did, and again, the order in which it went, and very much like goal based, and he understood like why he made the match in a way that he did, which he didn't explain that to me. I had to figure that out on my own way after, but just the fact that I saw him do it let me know that this was how I needed to approach professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm. So what was the light bulb that kind of made you, okay, I get wrestling now. What made you become a better worker?
Oh man, I've had so many of those moments where I thought I got it and then realized I didn't, and then thought I got it and then realized I didn't, and then
So it's a
over and over.
continuous process.
It's a continuous process. One of the big ones though was wrestling in Japan for the first time, and just seeing the way wrestling worked over there, which is completely different. Because it's not an independent system; it's really by promotion, and
Mm-hmm.
DDT has 25 or 20, I don't know, regular wrestlers that all know each other and they all have their spots and their stuff and their match. And so they can put it together super quickly because they know their strengths super well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you and I, who have been in DDT for 10 years together and have been on every show 2 or 3 times a weekend for the past 10 years, when you and I wrestle each other, it takes us 5 minutes to make a simple match that highlights our strengths because we know
Mm-hmm.
them. And then from that, like, because it took us 5 minutes to do that, then we'll have time to expand and add little fun moments or characters or new stories or things that I can't do
Mm-hmm.
normally. And really, that was probably like the biggest light bulb moment was coming to Japan and seeing how easy and simple everything was over there.
And what was
But
the biggest difference that working in Japan for DDT and I don't know working for companies in the UK or Canada or USA? What was the main difference?
the consistency, really. People like knowing their spots and knowing their strengths and like having a comeback, having a way to get into your finish, like having every piece of the structure set that you already know for yourself and you know is going to be good, and so you sort of just have to put it together in a very rudimentary way and then adding from there. Whereas I think in the UK, there's a lot less respect between wrestlers, again, because everyone's independent, you don't know as well. So it's a lot less regarded of a thing as when you say in the UK, I have my comeback, your opponent always thinks this could be the first time he's doing it. But in
Mm-hmm.
Japan, when you say, I have my comeback, I can assume that you've been doing that comeback for 5 years. And over the 5 years, you've paid attention. And because you've been doing it for so long, it is now great. So I will not argue with it. I will accept it and respect it.
So what you're saying is everybody's following a certain process and everybody has mutual respect for the for
Yes.
everybody at the card. Everybody understands, okay, this is an opening match, this is, the second match, and everybody
Yes.
understands the importance of it. Good, good,
Because
good.
everyone's visions are aligned, and something that's also very different in Japan is that every promotion has their own style. If you watch DDT or Dragon Gate or New Japan, it's different ways of building the matches. They employ different structures. But if you watch every single Dragon Gate 6-man tag, the structure is always relatively the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then because it's that way, if you're on a card and you're the first 6-man tag and there'll be another one, you know how to structure it to make sure that the later 6-man tag gets the other way. Whereas in the UK or anywhere else in independent wrestling, there is no formal agreement on how that works. And it's really wild. People sort of just build however and whatever. And there's a lot less acceptance and there's a lot less like conventions that are just going to need to be applied to the show.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
planning becomes a lot more difficult because of it.
Awesome. Awesome. What would you say? What would be your advice for somebody that is, that just got his first chance to go to Japan? That just got his first chance, in any, bigger promotion.
Watch, pay attention to the other wrestlers because you're going to be working with them a lot. Understand and know their things and get ideas based off of that. Something that happens that is like amazing to see, and I wish it was more prevalent everywhere else. When you wrestle in Japan for the first time, when you wrestle in DDT for the first time, the whole locker room will be watching your match after your first match. And then by your second match, they will already have many ideas of how to introduce or how to counter all of your moves and all of your spots.
Mm-hmm.
What you did as a comeback on the first day will be your comeback, and you won't even have to explain it on day two. You will just go, they'll go, up, Mike Bailey, your comeback, and I'll go, okay, this one, that one, and they'll know exactly what I mean because they've seen it the previous day.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Mike, thank you very much for this conversation. Where can people find you if they want to follow you? Like you have YouTube, I know you're doing Twitch and stuff. Where can we
Yeah.
find you?
I'm at Speedball Bailey on Twitter and Instagram. I'm twitch.tv/Speedball Bailey, where I stream a lot and I watch some wrestling. And oftentimes, if you're like interested in learning it, I spend a lot of time breaking it down and talking about psychology and answering questions and all that. So that's a lot of fun. And when I say psychology, I also mean structure and logic, not just
Logic,
psychology.
yeah.
Um, but mostly, if you're finding about me for the first time, the main thing you can do is go on YouTube in the search bar, type in Speedball Mike Bailey. I've got loads of matches that are lots of fun and on YouTube. And if you enjoy them, then please share them and let your friends know again, because this is how pro wrestling works. We don't have billboards, we don't have ads on TV.
Yeah.
I can only grow my career as an independent wrestler because you tell your friends that you enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mike. Are we gonna see you like in some matches in the future? Like, what's the situation right now?
I assume it's the same thing for you. There's a pandemic, and I have no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I just hoped. I did see your girlfriend, posted on Twitter that she has a match, I think.
Yeah,
So that's why I asked. Maybe,
yeah, no, she's back in America.
Yeah.
I'm not in America yet, so Canada's still
Awesome.
firmly locked down.
Well, awesome. Mike, hope we do this again. It was a great interview, and a lot of people, I hope, learned a lot, not only for wrestling, but, in life in general. Thank you, Mike, again, and, all the best, and we'll be and stay in touch.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.